that many said was a debate that turned into a clown car show. This one individual, Ashley Webb, who is a transgender and intersex individual, was really attracting a lot of attention for the answers given. Listen.
Oh, I ran for office several times. Didn't win, but I did run. And then I'm a songwriter, and then I write my own books. I believe they called it pork bellying. By cutting out the pork bellying from all the bills, I'm sure that would save a lot of money as well.
Phil, you just said you're for Medicare for all. Is everyone on this panel? Dan, no?
Yeah. I mean,
okay.
It's
incredible. Just checking. Just checking. That's 8 for 8 with the candidates tonight.
I'm actually on Medicare. And I suppose the biggest thing is, like, I'm just an angry citizen now, and if I got elected, I'd be an angry senator.
Who doesn't want an angry citizen? Oh, there's so much there. I felt like that was like kind of like watching a Saturday Night Live skit or something. I don't even know.
You know, I wanted to put up the how you could go about donating to Ashley's campaign, but we weren't able to get that up in time. But I'm pretty sure if you go on DuckDuckGo, you can look up Ashley Webb and you can find out how to donate to that campaign, because I think America needs Ashley Webb in the United States Senate.
It's a little tough, by the way, to do that. I actually spent time yesterday trying to find Ashley Webb's campaign page, and all you really can get is on Maine's Democrat Party page. There's a bio. But I was able to learn during my deep research that Ashley Webb is a bit of a one-person campaign. There's no actual campaign manager or communications director or spokesperson. It appears to be a one-person
At the very least, start a GoFundMe page.
From watching that, that's shocking. There's not a full campaign apparatus behind this individual.
Well, one thing that was interesting, though, because I watched a lot of the debate, because I wanted to see about some of the other Troy Jackson. There's a few other the candidates that seem to be front-runners, if you will. And none of them were willing to distance themselves from Graham Plattner, right? They didn't want to say anything bad about Graham Plattner while embracing the far-left platform and issues that he brought, driven by the Democrats, Socialists. So whoever the candidate is, it's going to be identical, pretty much, in terms of the socialist platform that Plattner was bringing.
Minus the Nazi tattoo.
Of war, a wealth tax, and passing a Green New Deal, among others issues there that you see up on the board. So with that, we bring in Gustavo Cordillo, co-chair of the New York City Democratic Socialists of America. Thank you for joining us. Obviously, this is a really hot topic right now.
Thanks for inviting us.
Thank you for being here. We were just talking in the break, and we were saying hello to each other. Your family came here from Peru, really in the middle of the heat of the Shining Path. They were Maoist, communist guerrillas in Peru. So why did your family come to America?
The economic situation in South America and in Peru was in a really bad place. But I think that much of what we could say is responsible for that actually was the imposition of capitalism, and American imperialism in many cases is actually what brings immigrants to the U.S. coming out of Latin America. And
so they come here because they don't like the imposition of American imperialism in the country that they're in?
Yes, in many countries.
So they come here?
In many countries, there have been undemocratic coups that have destabilized countries, and that's pushed people out.
Oh, well, you would think they would want to go somewhere that wasn't imposing that on them if that were the case. But, it's interesting because the Shining Path, if you look at what they wanted to overthrow the democratic institutions in Peru. They wanted to abolish capitalism in Peru. And we see some of those same threads in the DSA in terms of what it stands for. And one of the things is very basic. We just celebrated the 250th anniversary of the country. And one of the most basic things is Article 1 in our Constitution. Are you in favor of abolishing Article 1 of the Constitution?
No. We support a democratic route to transformative change in the United States. We think that we need to put the working class before the billionaire class.
So you don't want to abolish the Senate, the United States Senate, because that's what Article 1 is.
The United States Senate is an undemocratic institution. It gives more representation to people in smaller states than to the 30 million people in California.
So you've got the House of Representatives, which is population-driven, and then you've got the Senate. So every state, if you're a small state, you still get 2 senators, even though you only get maybe 1 congressman, in order to make all of the states have fair representation. So you say, I'm just confused.
When you ask normal Americans if Congress and the Senate and our political system is working for them, most people are very unhappy with the political system, and they say it's not working for them. When we think about the 250th anniversary of the United States, and we think about our proudest moments in U.S. history, I think of times like when ordinary people rose up and they changed the Constitution to abolish slavery, to give women the right to vote.
Everyone's proud of that.
And
that's a nationwide pride in the country.
But back in those moments, those were considered radical movements because those people dared to say we need transformative change in the United States.
Right.
And
we struggle to become a more perfect union. But I just want to ask you again, do you want to abolish the United States Senate? Because you said you approve of Article 1, but then you said you didn't think the Senate works.
We think that the Senate should be reformed, that we should have a more democratic government system. But that's a long-term change that we're seeking. And in the short term, we're focused on issues like affordability, like freezing the rent, which we've just done in New York, like creating a universal childcare system, which we're also taking steps toward doing, like fixing our energy grid. In 2023 here in New York, we passed the Build Public Renewables Act, which would create publicly owned renewable energy to have a more reliable, cheaper, cleaner energy grid. These are our immediate term demands where we do have a long-term horizon where we do want to democratize our government. But in the short term, we're focused on affordability. We're focused on a working class economic agenda.
The question is, how does the government become more democratized if the government takes over more of the power? So, for example, here in New York, if you have government-owned grocery stores, right? And that was what Mamdani promised. I know you were supportive of his election, and I interviewed him here. So they're like breaking ground on one grocery store so far. It's going to cost $30 million to build a grocery store. In what world does it make sense to build a $30 million grocery store and put competitive pressure on the bodegas that are in the neighborhood?
I think that what we saw in the mayoral campaign is the mayor was able to build a movement that inspired people to believe that we could have a government that works for ordinary people, that is actually responsive to the working class.
Inspiration is great, but if you're the bodega owner, how would you feel? If the government opened a big grocery store right next to your bodega,
if one publicly owned grocery store that brings prices down in the neighborhood is enough to put someone out of business, then maybe they shouldn't have been in that business in the first place.
Interesting. Let's play, let's look at the big picture for a second here and play this from Marco Rubio, because his family came from Cuba. You were talking about your family coming from Peru. And he wants nothing of any socialist, democratic socialist, whatever you want to call it, communist presence in the United States. And he may be running against one of your candidates potentially in 2028. So let's take a look.
I heard they're picking the news. You sometimes hear of communism, for example, is that it sounds good in theory, but it never works in practice. That's actually not true. Communism does not sound good in theory. The world it envisions for all of us is small, flat, gray, leveled of all exception, drained of all that is good and noble in the human soul.
What's your response to that, Gustavo?
I would say that we are looking to, when we look at to take inspiration from governments abroad, we're looking at countries like Norway, Sweden, cities like Vienna that have actually created affordable housing for all under socialist governments.
All of them have very active capitalism happening in those countries, though. They have big technology investments, very big companies that do well.
We are still operating in capitalism.
Yeah.
We're trying to pass transformative reforms to create an economy that will work for the working class. And we've seen that happen already in history in Sweden and in Norway. And yet, in those countries, a very large portion of the economy is publicly owned. That's a system that we want to bring, for example, to the electricity system here in the United States. We think it would be better if the government had a bigger role in operating the grid, and actually most voters agree with that. 25% of the energy generation here in New York is publicly owned. Yeah. It's the most affordable energy.
Well, there's always been a New York Power Authority. In fact, my grandfather served on the New York Power Authority many years ago, and so there is a public role, I think, for that. But then you look at like these wind farm projects that were so, completely unaffordable. And they basically had to scrap all of these wind farms because they couldn't afford to build them, and also because they didn't go through the environmental process to prove that they weren't going to damage the ocean.
Those wind farms were being built by private developers who need a profit. And it's when we're giving private large developers an increasing large share for every project.
But don't you think that these builders have expertise and understanding of the business of it? Like, what part of the government is really awesome at creating a very efficient, well-run industry or business? Tell me, can you point to anything?
The New York Power Authority, you named it, is such a well-run agency that manages large-scale generation in New York City. Our water is municipally run. It's some of the best water in the country.
Well, those things have been in place for decades, as I just pointed out. But, the question of whether or not you want a larger role for the government is one of the big questions here. Let's take a look at the homeless encampment that has just sprung up along West 45th Street. And this is after Mayor Mamdani is in office. He doesn't want to remove any homeless people from the streets. And it's causing a lot of problems for the small business owners that try to have a company, a business along that route. What do you think of this when you look at this squalor in New York City?
I think it's a huge crisis, and it's been around since capitalists have been mayors for decades.
Yes, not like that. I've been here for a very long time, and these things come and go. Mayor Adams actually removed the homeless encampments from the streets because they're not safe for the people who live there, and they're not safe for the people who live around them.
The problem we're facing in our housing system is that we talk about tenants and we say they have to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. They have to be responsible financially, but when we look at the landlords, we don't use those same standards. Landlords in New York have been making a 12% return on their investment. for, on
How
average.
much should they make? What's fair for the landlord to make if you don't like 12?
They're complaining that 12 is not enough. And we don't think that anyone should have a constitutional right to double-digit returns on their investment. That's why we've implemented...
No one should have a right to a double-digit return on their investment.
No one has a right. That's not... No,
what are you talking
no
about?
one's in that, that's not in the Constitution, but what we see is that when we implement a rent freeze, we have landlords who are crying that the government is going to put them out of business.
They're trying to run a business, and they're trying to do it effectively. No, are all landlords perfect? Are some landlords lousy? Of course they are. But I just think that the idea that no one should make a double-digit profit is the antithesis of the desire to, you can be anything you want to be in New York. I actually, and this goes to an issue of something that you mentioned. You called the police commissioner of a Skyan billionaire family, the Tisch family, Jessica Tisch. And I just want to, she's serving the city. Obviously, she doesn't need to work. She comes from a very successful family. They were immigrants from Ukraine and Poland, and they bought a rundown hotel in New Jersey, managed to turn it around, managed to make a profit on it, managed to make a business, and they became very successful. But she chooses to oversee the police code. And I did an interview the other day, just in terms of defunding police, with two hero police officers who saved a woman who wanted to take her own life on the Brooklyn Bridge. And it made me think about this issue of, we need more mental health professionals than we do cops, and we should have fewer cops. And I just want to play this quick soundbite for you and get your reaction to it.
Which floor?
12. His first job was flipping burgers at a Jack in the Box because he needed a job to get an apartment, put a roof over our heads. He sold men's clothing at the men's department at JCPenney's, and he worked his way up to General Motors. And look at where I am now. My brother is an ER doctor. My sister is a psychologist at the Cleveland Clinic. Look at where we are now in just one generation.
All right, that was another example that I have. So we'll switch gears for a second. That's Aisha Hazmi. She works here. Her family immigrated from Pakistan. Her father flipped hamburgers and worked 3 jobs in order to put his kids through college, and they became successful. Is that your idea of the American dream?
You're describing actually what my parents did when they moved here.
Wonderful.
My dad, his first job in the United States was working at Wendy's. My mom's first job was a house cleaner, and they did make a living for themselves, and they had success. At the same time, I think that they're an exception. When I see the people of my generation, my friends, they feel like they can't afford to have a family anymore because the prices have skyrocketed so much. New York City has become such a playground for the rich that young people, they feel like they can't live here and have babies anymore. And that's why we're implementing...
The early immigrants had 8 babies in a tenement apartment in New York. They didn't think about whether or not they could afford 8 babies. They were like, okay, we're just going to embrace life and we're going to have a big family and we're going to figure out a way to make this work.
I don't think that returning to tenement squalor is...
I'm not suggesting people should. I'm just saying that that's what
agenda.
happened, and then the generations became more and more successful over time.
I think that what's happening now is people are struggling against the economic reality. They're coming together and they're organizing for a new political and economic system.
All right. We're going to be watching the progress of your group, the DSA, and you had some big wins in recent primaries. It's a very interesting debate to have about what makes this country tick and who we are. So I thank you very much.